Today, we're diving into a really powerful psychological concept, emotional decoupling. It's all about how you can reclaim your internal peace, especially when you feel like you're constantly getting swept up in someone else's emotional drama. Let's get right into it. The most striking truth about emotional decoupling is that the most powerful way to protect yourself is not to build a wall, but to stop being a mirror. We generally assume that empathy and responsiveness are the keys to connection, but in high-pressure dynamics, your natural ability to feel what others feel is the exact doorway used to bypass your boundaries. Why does acting compassionate often lead to you feeling like an emotional puppet? This is the core paradox of emotional decoupling. The moment you realize that your own neutrality is the only shield that no one can penetrate. All right, so here's our game plan for today. We're going to start with the mirror paradox and figure out why our empathy can sometimes feel like a trap. Then we'll get into the nuts and bolts of breaking the circuit and making what we'll call the sovereignty shift. And finally, we'll arm you with some practical tools like the neutrality shield, so you can truly become the architect of your own atmosphere. Okay, first up, let's unpack this really fascinating and kind of counterintuitive idea, the mirror paradox. We're always told that empathy is this incredible strength, right? But what if, in certain dynamics, it's actually the very thing that leaves you wide open and vulnerable? Now, this isn't about becoming a cold, unfeeling person. Not at all. It's about recognizing a crucial vulnerability. Your amazing ability to mirror someone else's emotions, their stress, their anger, their sadness, can actually be used, consciously or not, to break down your defenses. It's like you've left the front door open for a friend, but instead, their personal emotional hurricane comes raging right into your living room. And that mirroring effect, well, it leads us straight into something called the empathy trap. This is where we look at the psychology and even the biology of why we sometimes feel like our emotional strings are being pulled by someone else. You know that feeling, right? Your boss walks in with a thundercloud over their head, and suddenly your whole day feels ruined before it's even started. That's the trap. Okay, so there's actually a technical name for the solution to this, and it's affective neutralization. I know, it sounds a bit like a sci-fi term, but it's a real documented cognitive shift. It simply means you're learning to consciously untangle your nervous system from someone else's. You're shifting from that automatic, knee-jerk sympathy to a place of deliberate, conscious autonomy. So how does this trap actually manifest? It usually shows up in three common patterns. First, there's the trap itself, that gut feeling that setting a boundary is mean or cruel. You feel guilty. Then there's hyper-vigilant attunement. This one is exhausting. It's when you're constantly on high alert, scanning the other person's mood, trying to predict what's coming next just to feel safe. And finally, the mirroring effect, where you just unconsciously soak up their emotions, basically downloading their stress directly into your own system. And this slide, this really gets to the heart of it. It shows the two states of being. On one side, you have the managed subject. For them, happiness is basically outsourced. It depends on someone else's approval, they're carrying around two people's emotions, and their brain is always asking, are they mad at me? But on the other side, you have the sovereign observer. Here, your internal weather is your own. You can watch their storm without getting soaked, and you're asking the much more powerful question, am I okay? The whole point of decoupling is to move from the left side of this chart to the right. So how in the world do you actually make that shift? This brings us to the practical how-to part of our explainer. This isn't just a philosophy, it's a systematic process for breaking that circuit of emotional contagion. Let's walk through the three key moves. Here they are, the three big moves. First is subjective separation. You literally start labeling the emotions you feel. When that wave of anxiety hits, you pause and ask, wait, is this mine or is it theirs? You're basically building a mental firewall. Second, the non-mirroring move. This one's physical. You consciously relax your face, you keep your voice calm and steady, even if they're getting louder. You simply refuse to get on their emotional roller coaster. And third, the informational anchor. This is a total power move. You train yourself to filter out all the drama and just listen for the core facts of what's being said. And listen, this sequence isn't just about willpower, it's about neurobiology. When you're in an emotional storm, your reactive brain, the amygdala, hijacks the show. These three steps are designed to pull you out of that reactive state and fire up your logical brain, the prefrontal cortex. The crazy thing is, with practice, you can completely retrain your default response. Their drama no longer triggers your drama. Instead, it becomes the cue for your neutrality. And that, right there, changes the entire game. So we've covered the how, but let's talk about the why. Why is this process so incredibly effective? It all comes down to the psychology of reclaiming your own personal agency. I mean, think about it for a second. We live in a culture that often praises and rewards big, passionate, emotional reactions. So why in the world is choosing neutrality so powerful? Well, it's because it calmly denies the other person the one thing they need to pull you into their orbit, your emotional reaction. And this gets to the very core of our motivation. So often, our vulnerability comes from this deep human need for validation. We'd rather be understood than be at peace. But our real strength comes from a much more primal biological drive, homeostasis. Your brain's number one job, above all else, is to keep your internal system stable and balanced. Emotional decoupling works because it aligns with that primary mission. It puts your internal peace back in the driver's seat. And look, this whole idea is grounded in a simple, undeniable biological reality. It's called psychological differentiation. It's just a fancy way of saying we are separate organisms. We have separate bodies, separate brains, and separate nervous systems. Emotional enmeshment is what happens when we forget that, when those lines get blurred. Decoupling is simply the act of remembering and honoring the biological separation that was there all along. Okay, let's get even more practical. This section is all about building your neutrality shield, giving you a couple of really sharp awareness tools you can pull out and use in the heat of the moment. This is it. This is your first line of defense. The next time you feel that sudden, overwhelming surge of anxiety or frustration out of nowhere, the most powerful thing you can do is just pause. And then you perform a quick audit by asking this simple question: whose feeling is this? Is this emotion actually coming from me, or did I just catch it from someone else in the room, like an emotional flu? Just asking the question creates a tiny bit of space, and that space is enough to break the automatic mirroring cycle. Here's another powerful strategy you might hear about. It's called the gray rock method, and the goal is exactly what it sounds like. You become as uninteresting as a gray rock. The method is to give the most minimal, factual, non-emotional response as possible. You just don't feed the drama. And the result? The person who's looking for that big reaction eventually gets bored and goes looking for a more interesting target. And the key realization here is that your piece is not an attack on them. It's simply an act of self-preservation. And this right here, this might be the most profound and difficult realization in this whole process. It is the permission slip you finally give to yourself. For anyone who has ever been caught in that empathy trap, saying this to yourself can feel absolutely revolutionary. It breaks that chemical cycle of enmeshment. It asserts your fundamental right to your own emotional state, totally independent of anyone else's. This is the very essence of emotional sovereignty. And that brings us to our final section. We've looked at the paradox, we've dissected the traps, and we've talked about the tools. So what's the ultimate takeaway? It's about shifting your entire identity. It's about becoming the architect of your own internal atmosphere. It's realizing your peace is your power. If you remember just one thing from our time together, please let it be this critical distinction. You are responsible to people. You can be kind, you can be respectful, you can be compassionate, but you are not responsible for them, not for their feelings, not for their happiness, and not for their reactions. That is their work to do. And deeply understanding that difference is the absolute key to emotional freedom. So we'll end with this final thought. I want you to start thinking of your internal world, your thoughts, your feelings, your sense of well-being, as your own private territory. You are the sole architect. You get to decide what the weather is like in there. Emotional decoupling isn't about building fortresses to keep the world out. It's about becoming a skilled and conscious architect, using awareness as your primary building material. It's what ensures that no matter how hard someone else's storm is raging outside, it doesn't have to rain in your world.